Greetings to you. I am Brother James Muhammad, a student in the ministry of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and your host for this week's segment of Closing the Gap broadcast. We're so very happy and honored that you joined us this evening, and we are doubly honored to host our dear brother and very, very special guest, Student Minister Abel Muhammad, representative to the Latino community for the Nation of Islam, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Before we proceed, we want to also extend the greetings and love from our dear sister, Stala Muhammad. She's on another show, as a matter of fact, and she blames me for that because everybody's seeking her out now since she's been a host on Closing the Gap. She's very popular, but she extends her love and greetings, of course, to our viewing and listening audience. We are accompanied by our dear brother and student minister, Chad Muhammad of Muhammad Mosque number 47. So let's proceed. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, the one God to whom all praise is due, the Lord of the worlds, we thank Almighty God Allah for his merciful intervention in our affairs in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. We thank him for raising up from our midst his messenger, Messiah, the exalted Christ, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, through whom we have been given our beloved and blessed Redeemer. And I refer to him as my personal Savior. The man of whom I speak is the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Their names, beloved brothers and sisters, dear family, friends, and even if there are some enemies, we are happy to greet all of you with the greeting words of peace. We say it in the Arabic language, Assalamu alaikum. And of course, we want to allow our dear brother and fellow student in the ministry, Student Minister Chad Muhammad, to make an opening remark or greeting to our viewing and listening audience.
Praise be to Allah. Assalamu alaikum, family. Just glad to be here, Brother James and Student Minister Abel. Looking forward to the show. Also, just wanted to extend the greetings of Assalamu alaikum to you, Student Minister Abel, on behalf of our Student Regional Minister, Brother Patrick Muhammad, and all of the believers here in the 7th region.
All praises due to Allah. And so, our dear brother, Student Minister Abel Muhammad, needs no introduction. He's been on the show, and he's been on our affiliate broadcasts as well. So we are very familiar with our brother. But this is very special to me because I get an opportunity to learn more and more about our community that we don't necessarily interact enough with. We have to emphasize that we are one. And I don't think anybody could do that better than our dear brother, Student Minister Abel Muhammad. So welcome to Closing the Gap broadcast, Brother Minister. Assalamu alaikum. The mic is yours.
Thank you, dear brothers. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. En el nombre de Allah, el benéfico, el misericordioso. In the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. By whatever name we call him, all the best names belong to him. The most beautiful names belong to him.
That's right.
But we know him and are blessed to know his personal name that he wanted to give to us to call him by when he appeared amongst us in the person of Master Fard Muhammad. And we are eternally grateful for his coming and raising up from amongst the Black people of America. One who, though he was in a condition like the rest of our people at that time in the early 1930s, yet there was something special in that man that recognized this great teacher from the East, as he was known back then.
Yes.
They thought he might be a prophet or some great wise teacher who was teaching things that had never been heard in Detroit in the early 1930s. And many followed him, and many came to listen to him, and he was giving out, I heard, 25,000 holy names at that time.
That's right.
But out of all of those thousands, we only know of one man who recognized him for who he truly was. Not just a wise teacher, though he was that, the wisest of them. Not just a man who loved us, though he absolutely did that.
That's right.
But he recognized him, most importantly, as the fulfillment of what was written in the scriptures about the coming of God. On first hearing and seeing him, and because of that special relationship that was developed from that moment, and him becoming a student of Master Fard Muhammad for 3 years and 4 months, we are now grateful and can never thank Allah enough for him giving to us our eternal leader, teacher, and guide, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
I never saw either of those two men with my physical eyes, but I thank them both because both of them love us enough that they prepared and made one, formed one, developed one, produced one out of their unique love for us. They replicated their love in another man that was able to put every word in its right place. A man who just knows what we need when we don't even know what we're looking for ourselves. A man who is so in love with Allah, his Christ, and his people that he's willing to face all of the powers of evil of this world with Allah and the Christ to prove that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. That beautiful man that we heard from earlier this afternoon that has a message not only to the black man in America, not only to the black man in the Caribbean or Central and South America or wherever we may be found on the planet, but he has a message for the black, the brown, the red, the yellow, and any who would listen. While they want to call him the godfather of hate today, we know that he is far, 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 far from that. As a matter of fact, he's the antithesis of that.
That's right.
He's the Son of God of love.
That's right.
And we thank him for being brave enough to love God enough to face whatever he must face to free us all. And that man is the man who I love and who has taught me of Master Fard Muhammad and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and who without him we would all be lost today. And that man is, of course, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. It's in their names that I am honored to be with you and greet you this afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, in the greeting words of peace in our original language and the language of the righteous, Arabic. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Well, it's wonderful to host you once again, dear brother. I have to state, though, I will be exceedingly joyful when you return back to broadcasting with Nuestra NOI. We really miss you, dear brother. And, you know, I've been in Brother Tony's ear about it. Tony is on with us now.
That's right.
He knows I've been in his ear with regularity.
That's right.
When is my brother coming back here?
Inshallah, for November, we will be back if it is the will of Allah. We're kind of trying to reform our schedule so that we can be consistent with one day for it. But inshallah, that message and this message we know has to be given now to all of our people, regardless of language, label, or latitude or longitude on the planet. We need this message. So we have to do, and we don't want to be found holding back what could benefit many. So we're gonna make a striving for that. For November, we will be back on a regular basis on Closing the Gap Network again with our all Spanish broadcast, if it is the will of Allah.
All praises due to Allah. And as the Messiah said when he was broadcasting for the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we anxiously await his return to this microphone.
Allahu Akbar.
Allahu Akbar.
All praise is due to Allah. So I'd like to turn the mic over to my dear brother and fellow student in the ministry, as well as our co-host, Student Minister Chad Muhammad. And I want to encourage our viewing and listening audience to engage our honored guest. This is an excellent opportunity. So to you, brother, Student Minister Chad.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, sir. So for those that are listening in, the topic of discussion today is rising above and beyond culture into the thinking of God. Very, very exciting topic to talk about and to deal with. So glad to have our dear brother and student in the ministry, Brother Abel Muhammad, on today. If you could, just for our listening audience, dear brother, and I know you probably have, talked about this story millions of times to exaggerate, but it's always interesting to me when I heard about your coming into the Nation of Islam, because by Allah's grace, and you spoke with our brother. We have a brother here, Brother Hosian. You have spoken with him before, and our dear brother, he have a Hispanic, as they would say, Spanish speaking brother, and by Allah's grace, Student Minister Abel, he's my fish. And we have developed a relationship over the years, and it came through music, from working into hip hop, so we was working real close together and everything like that. And he had a chance to meet Minister Rasul when he was over the 7th region. So he got a chance to meet him back in the days, but he didn't come into Islam then. It was like years later, running to him again. And now, he's working hard. I mean, he's a soldier, Brother James, to tell you. The believers love him. He's a soldier, but we tried to help to get him into getting more of the brown community, So if you could, just to share your story of how you came into it, introduce, and if you wouldn't mind, I only can imagine, like, at that time, how people think with the Nation of Islam, you think this hardcore black, like, what would you be doing in the Nation of Islam? What would attract you as a non-African American to be a part of an African American organization, as they would say, So if you could mind by starting sharing that with us, dear brother.
Yes, sir. It was actually via in high school. I was in my junior year, I believe it was either sophomore or junior year, and there was a brother who was he was a senior, but he was a registered FOI at the time in my school, and he would come with his newspapers in study hall, and he would sit. We were assigned seats at a study hall. There was 4 of us at a table, and it was me, 2 other Mexican brothers, and this brother who I found out later was from Belize, a brother named Aiden Muhammad, or Aiden X, he was at that time. And it was a book that he had one time. I think I have it here. Let me see if I can pull it out here. How to Eat to Live. And so he had the paperback of this on the table one day, and it was sitting kind of like this, right? So that was my view, what you all are seeing. Almost like this on top of a stack of newspapers. Honestly, I didn't even notice the stack of newspapers. All I saw was these words up here, from God in person. And of course, I was intrigued because I never seen a book say from God in person in it before. Not even the Bible, which I used to try to read, said from God in person anywhere in it. So I was very intrigued by the book. I said, what is that there? And he said, kind of casually, it's it's a book on our dietary laws. I said, can I see it? He's like, yeah, but you got to give it back. And I was thinking, well, trust me, I'm not trying to keep any book. I'm not. I don't want to read it. I was honestly, I saw the interesting looking. I thought he was Asian man at that time on the cover, and I wanted to see what this was. And to see, honestly, I was opening it up to see if there was any pictures in it. Man. I was disappointed to see there were absolutely no pictures in the book outside of that one on the cover.
Yes, sir.
But I just started flipping through it. And then I started reading it, and I said, well, can I check it out? I don't know why I was not a reader at that time. Obviously I could read. I was in high school, but I was not somebody who read for even when I was supposed to read, right? For school or anything. So something about the book attracted me, though, and I started flipping through it. And I basically read it over the weekend, if I remember, or 1 or 2 days. and I brought it back to him. And I remember being sparked by, I didn't understand a lot of what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was saying. Not because it was complicated, just stuff I'd never thought about or didn't hear about before. But for some reason, it resonated with me, and it was logical to me about how if it takes 24 hours to digest food and you're eating several times a day, there's mathematically, it made sense to me. There's not enough time for your body to consume and rid itself of the impurities of all of the other meals. That just made perfect logical sense to me. So I read it and I started following the instructions of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in the book. I'm not sure why. I think because it made sense to me. And I saw that he kept coming from a spiritual point of view, saying that this man, Master Fard Muhammad, God in person, is written throughout the book, I had no idea who that was. Didn't really make a difference to me. And I wasn't looking for religion. I just thought it was interesting in terms of the dietary aspect. And I started following it. And lo and behold, within about 60 days, I was down to 1 meal a day in high school. I was sleeping about 3 or 4 hours a night. I used to fail my first class in the morning because I could never get there on time. Now I was getting to school on time. My grades went up. Everything started changing about me. So I remember as the change started taking place, I talked to the brother and I said, what else do you have to read? Because now I was intrigued about these other aspects, because I didn't have to believe in how to eat to live. I just tried it. And everything that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said would happen did happen. So it sparked my interest that, well, he's obviously not lying. Let me see and investigate what these other aspects of what he's teaching are. I didn't know what Islam was. I really didn't have any clue about Malcolm X, none of that stuff. So I had no clue what was happening. I'd heard Minister Farrakhan on rap music up to that point, because I was a big fan of Public Enemy, Brand Nubian, Poor Righteous Teachers, all of those kind of things. But I didn't know who the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was, or Malcolm, or their relationship to one another. So all of that was devoid. So I read, then the brother purchased for me Message to the Black Man in America. I went home and read that book in a couple of days also. But that book sealed it for me. The opening of the book on God and who is that mystery God.
Yeah.
It was just so logical to me. I didn't understand all the other aspects of history or, it was my first time hearing anything like this. I just started believing it. I still didn't know who the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan really was. I didn't realize I'd heard him in rap music before. And I didn't even understand the connection of Elijah Muhammad to the rappers that I was already naturally gravitating towards. That kind of takes place afterwards. But I fell in love with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and his explanation of Islam, which was to me so practical, so non-spooky. It made me feel like I was in charge of my life and I didn't have to leave it up to quote unquote fate or destiny or somebody else's power. I felt empowered to be responsible for my own life, my own circumstances, my own condition, and change them. I read that book and then I started reading the Final Call newspaper. Believe it or not, I still didn't really know who the minister was. And I didn't realize until the brother later in that year introduced me, I had been going to school with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan's granddaughter this whole time.
Wow.
And it was her encouragement in particular at that time, and my girlfriend at that time, who we soon broke up after that, who kept encouraging me to just go to the mosque. I didn't know what a mosque was. I was ashamed to admit it, but they kept just saying, you should just go to the mosque and hear for yourself. I didn't know. I honestly, I didn't even know what that meant, to be able to bridge that. And you're a teenage boy. I didn't want to admit that to anybody, that I have no clue what you're asking me to do. And I'll just be like, yeah, and go about my business. I then started to listen to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. They used to play his messages on Sunday mornings on the AM radio station here in Chicago. And for an hour, they'd play a clip of the minister, and I'd be there with my cassette tape and I'd be recording what he said. And then I'd go back the whole week and listen to whatever portion that was. And there was one portion where he was talking about the actual facts, the distance and the speed, the circumference of the earth, the square mileage of the earth. And I had already memorized it not knowing that that was what we had to memorize to become members of the Nation of Islam. I had memorized it from listening to him recite it because it felt so powerful listening to it. It felt so powerful to know that, yeah, if this is our home, we have to understand it and know it. And then I finally started going to different Black bookstores, and at that time, the Respect for Life bookstore here across from the Final Call administration building. I found my way there, started buying audio and videotapes of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Still had never gone to a mosque. Now on my way out of high school. I never graduated high school. The senior year, I didn't have enough credits because I'd flunked so many classes my first 2 and 3 years before I learned Islam, that even though I became an honor roll student my last year, it wasn't enough credits for me to graduate. So I left the school in June of my senior year without enough credits, and really just kind of try to find my way, picking up little jobs here, still listening to the minister, reading the Final Call. And then finally, almost 3 years later, in February of 1994, something just compelled me. My girlfriend or ex-girlfriend at that time, and the minister's granddaughter still kept just encouraging me, you just need to come to the mosque. Finally said, you know what? I should go to the mosque. And I find my way over on a snowy Wednesday night to 7351 South Stony Island Avenue. I had never been to that part of the city in my life. So I get on a bus in the snow. I lived all the way on the west side of the city by Midway Airport. I got on the 63rd Street bus, which goes from Midway Airport all the way to the end of the line is Stony Island. So I knew I couldn't miss the stop, but I didn't know where to go from there. So I get off the bus. There's several buses that stop on 63rd and Stony Island, but only one of them goes past Mosque Mariam. Several others go further east in different directions. Of course, I got on the wrong bus. And I got on the number 6 Jeffrey bus, and I should have known with the number 6 is not the one to get on. Now, I didn't know at the time, but now I know it's not the one I should have got on. And I realized that now I'm at 75th Street. Well, I knew the mosque was on 73rd Street. I don't see anything that looks like a mosque. I'm not sure exactly what I'm looking for either, let me tell you. All right, because we didn't have images of Mosque Mariam. There was no Google like that back then for me to look it up. No NOI.org for me to go and listen. No, I had not actually seen it, but it didn't look right to me. And I know I'm at 75th Street now, and I should be at 73rd. This bus had taken me all the way around to 75th and Yates, which is further east by about a mile than where I needed to be. So I decided to get off the bus there. I said, all right, I guess I got to go back west now for some distance. I'm not sure how far. All right, I know how to get on a bus. I go over. I'm waiting on the bus on 75th and Yates. And as I get on the bus, not sure, I'm about to ask the bus driver, does this go towards Stony? I look over, and there's a sister in a white garment and an FOI standing in front of her, a husband and wife standing there.
That's a lot, brother.
That's right. I know I'm on the right bus now.
Yeah.
So I said, I guess I'll kind of just follow them. I'm assuming they got to be going to the same place at this point. So I follow them. We had to walk down about a block and a half. I'm following them, but kind of at a distance because I could tell that he was with his wife. And I believe she was expecting, if I remember correctly at the time, a baby. I later found out that was a brother, Sensei Lemuel Muhammad, who's a great martial artist and a great graphic artist in the Nation of Islam, who worked for many years with the Final Call newspaper and developed many flyers for us at a certain time. And it was his wife at the time. And as we're walking and approaching, mind you, it's snow everywhere, so it's hard to see. I see them make a right into the mosque parking lot. I'm just following them at a distance, and he turns around. He goes, "Can I help you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I heard that there's a meeting here tonight. I'm here for." It's like, "Is this the right way?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, definitely." So he was, of course, very welcoming of me. All I remember after that, to be totally honest with you, I don't remember the search procedure. I don't remember how I was seated. All I remember is there was a lot of people in Muhammad University that Wednesday night. I didn't know what I was in store for. It didn't look like a mosque. It looked like a gymnasium, which it was. On Wednesday nights, we would meet in the gym. But that night, somebody opened up. Then student minister Ishmael Muhammad came up, the son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I had no idea who he was. And he introduced that night to give the lecture his brother, student minister Rasul Muhammad, who at the time was the minister at Muhammad Mosque #1 in Detroit, and was also son of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
That's
and
right.
I didn't realize at the time that both of them were raised in Mexico. And so he gave that night a subject called The Mission of Becoming a Muslim. And it was everything I had hoped for. That I was everything I'd read about. That I really was going that night to see if it was what I thought it was from my reading and to accept. And I did that night by Allah's grace. I got to shake student minister Rasul and student minister Ishmael's hand that night and began my journey, a 4-year process from then to become a registered member of the Nation of Islam.
Wow.
Beautiful, beautiful stuff.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. That's powerful, dear brother. Praise
to Allah.
Take one step towards Allah, he'll take two. In fact, he'll run to you. Make sure you have any guidance you need to get
exactly. And that was the biggest thing, was not being aware or knowing what I was even signing up for. It doesn't even seem like now looking back on it, I can see where Allah was helping to guide me along the way there. But I didn't even know what I was looking for or going for. It was just sort of a feeling that I had to go. It was sort of a feeling that I had to stand up. I didn't feel pressured by anybody. No, I didn't know anybody there. Nobody personally invited me there. It was just this compulsion I felt, this compelling feeling that this is where you should go. And the reason that it took me so long, that 4-year period between me going and accepting and registering, was really because I couldn't find myself in the teachings, in the words, if you will, because my perception of the words were narrow. But the more I fed directly from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and his explanation of the words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I saw how I was putting it into a narrow perspective when the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's words were actually much bigger. And it really solidified on an occasion when the minister shared with me, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said to me, he said, you know, that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that black is not local, black is not regional.
That's right.
Black is not even national, he said.
That's right.
But black is universal. He said, so brother, don't get bogged down by all the black talk. He said,
come on.
Take the teachings and put them in a way so that your people could understand them. Well, in order for them to put it in a way that my people could understand them, I would have to understand them.
Yes. Come on. That's
and
right.
So I was blessed to really wrestle with myself. And I realized now what I was wrestling with was not the teachings. I was wrestling with the world and its mind. That is all I had known, that had limited my perception, confined my understanding, and had really made me separated and felt disconnected from reality. So now when truth entered, it rocked my world. And I was spinning, trying to figure out, what does this mean? How can this be a message to the black man, but it resonates within me because I saw black as this. I saw black improperly. I saw self improperly. So of course, I have to now grow into understanding. And the only reason I could grow into understanding was because I had a master teacher that was gently and very lovingly helping me and us as a nation and people grow, and really not so much loosening the knot in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's tongue, but really loosening the knot in our hearts and ears that would not allow us to grow and understand his perfect words properly.
Oh, praise
be to Allah. Your story is a great example of our topic of discussion tonight, and rising above and beyond culture into the thinking of God, because that seems like that's exactly what you're describing. We do have a question from Brother Tony Muhammad Al-Share, since we talked about him, right?
Right.
He said, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Minister. The 94th Surah, the expansion reads, have we not expanded for thee thy breast, and removed from thee thy burden, which weighed down thy back, and exalted for thee thy mention? Surely with difficulty is ease. With difficulty is surely ease. So when thou art free from anxiety, work hard and make thy Lord thy exclusive object. End quote of that scripture. Then he asks, can you expound the possible meaning of this surah as it relates to the global mission of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
Oh, praise be. That's a huge question, but we're in the midst of it right now.
Yes,
We're in the midst of it right now.
That's
this
right.
This is part of it, as the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has explained to us that the expansion of the breast, like when you're running, you want to be able to be in a position where you can inhale inspiration, which allows your body to re-energize and revitalize as you now exhale and exert energy. But now you have to inhale. So the more in shape you are, the more your breast expands, literally in lung capacity. It increases your ability to move, to have endurance. And in a spiritual sense, it's also the place where your heart is. So when you expand your breast, your lungs, your ability to work, but more importantly, expand that organ that's pumping in there, that heart, not the physical heart, but the essence of our being. When we can purify our hearts and grow our hearts and our capacity to love ourselves fully and completely, then we're not weighed down by the burden of things that made us ashamed to love our people.
Praises to
and then with that, the burden's removed. And then even though that difficulty is past, now there's a new one, because now you have to come to a world that doesn't know their connection to you, that they've been taught negatively about Black, that they don't want to be Black. Even though they look like you, they'd rather be Puerto Rican, Cuban, Dominican, Mexican. Nothing wrong with those national titles. But many times they're used to keep us separate from one another. So there's a restriction of our breasts, our hearts. We put a limitation on ourselves where this is an exclusive thing. It's only for the Black man in America. No, it's first for the Black man in America. But ultimately, we believe in the resurrection of the righteous all over the planet Earth, regardless to creed, class, or color, regardless to nationality or ethnicity. But we have to get to the point first where we love ourselves.
That's right.
Once we love ourselves, then I can extend that love to my brother and show him how he and I are the same self, because we come from the same essence. But I can't show him that from an inferiority thinking or a slave mentality. I must first rid myself of that and be free fully and completely of that type of thinking and feeling, so that I could then be an example and give a true expression of what that means, not only by learning Spanish or Portuguese or French or Creole, which are necessary for us, but more importantly, it is the example of how we live our lives that will transform and help others. Because that, I believe it was you who mentioned it, Brother James, in the beginning. It's the testimony.
That's right.
That's the testimony. The way we live our life speaks much more than any verbiage we could use in an encounter with somebody. When they see you every day, that brother's always looking out for his family. That brother's always doing good, consistently doing good, consistently with a good message. How did he get to be that way?
Yes, sir.
And we can carry on that real global mission, because our breasts have been expanded, and in our expansion, we're inspiring others to expand their own.
All praises due to Allah. Very, very beautiful, dear brother.
Yeah.
You know, real talk, man. Look, we would love to be able to be educated by you as to how to properly treat our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters, to enhance or to be more attractive to them, and certainly not to, by through ignorance, offend.
Absolutely.
Because we do in many cases have like a black mentality,
Right.
you see, and some of us have to overcome that hurdle so that we could reach out to our family. And that's it's a tremendous family. As we look at the statistics,
that's right,
in 2025, Black folk won't be the minority. I think it's 2025 or somewhere around there, where
right.
our Hispanic or Spanish speaking family will be the minority. So
That's right.
the largest so-called minority. And it's necessary for us to make sure we can traverse that boundary to make sure that we are attractive to our brothers and sisters, and that we can emphasize being one with our brothers and sisters. And we need that kind of tutelage. We need that kind of guidance. So, I'd love for you to share with us some things that we can do, words that we can say to make our brothers and sisters of the Spanish-speaking family feel more comfortable, feel more attractive to us.
Absolutely, dear brother. One of the key terms is always just the same terms that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad started with: brother and sister,
Yes.
hermano and hermana. It automatically will instill a different bond with them, because it gives them a sense that you know something that the average person does not know, because they are not necessarily taught of their kinship to the Black man and woman of America. Right. So when you extend them, even though they may feel a sense of it, now it becomes concretized for them. Now that they see that, that's why I'm attracted to the music. That's why I'm attracted to their lifestyle, their culture, the styles, if you will, because there's a connection there that I wasn't aware of necessarily. So it begins with just the basics, getting us to see one another as brothers and sisters. That's now, right. I would say also that, of course, we've been instructed by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan to learn Spanish, but that is a more, longer projected thing that you would have to do to master it to that point where you feel comfortable teaching, if you would, in Spanish, right? But the real teaching is not from here. The real teaching is in the action. Yes. So we were blessed on the day of October 16th, the 28th anniversary of the Million Man March, thanks to Brother Sadiq here in Chicago and his beautiful family with the Farrakhan Cares initiative. Mm-hmm. We went into the community, and I think it was 1,000 families that we fed who are homeless, who are in bad situations. And most of them were those who are being shipped on buses here to Chicago with origins from Venezuela or Colombia. And they are housing them in tents and different places right outside of police stations. Very difficult circumstances for them. So by Allah's grace, we went there with food, with clothing, but more importantly, with the truth. Because how could we feed them bread but not feed their souls with what they need so they can understand what it is that they're coming into? And we were blessed to be able to give them a word, and they accepted it because it's logical. They didn't have a lot of resistance. They didn't have a lot of sort of questions in terms of insecurities or lack of sureness. Their questions were like, well, then how do you all see this? How do you all see that? And we were able to give them answers from the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and let them know that every time you look at a brother or sister from Venezuela, from Colombia, with your roots, in particular those from Venezuela, as though that our great brother, Hugo Chavez, had taught us. Yes, his great brother who loved his blackness and loved his indigenousness. He would go on TV and talk about how he loved the African features of his face and the indigenous features that his parents bestowed upon him, to let the people know that you should love who you are.
That's right.
And that every time, I said to them that our teacher taught them that every time you look at a black man, you're looking at God.
That's
He
right.
said, every time you look at your Colombian brother and sister, your Venezuelan brother and sister, you're looking at God. I said, because brothers, the scriptures teach us, how can you say you love God that you've never seen and hate your brother and sister that you see every day? Then that means that there's a component of God within each of us. And if we can't recognize it in what we see, how can we profess to recognize it in the unseen? That's absurd. And they agreed. And so they went around giving the greetings. We taught them what Assalamu alaikum meant. We taught them about the 1,000,000-man march. So all we had to do was be convicted and sure in what we true, not dogmatic, but in the truth of what we know, and share it with them where they are, so that they can stage by stage, if it is the will of Allah, grow and become what Allah has destined for them to become. The enemy has brought our brothers and sisters here with evil plans, I believe, with evil intentions. But Allah is the best knower. And he plans and he believes he could get all of his people. Well, do some of those people speak Spanish? Absolutely. Do some of them speak Creole? Absolutely.
Yes,
well,
sir.
Are we going to be able to become masters of all of those languages? Absolutely. But until we can master the language, the one language that we have is the language of love.
Yes, sir.
Which is expressed in our actions more than any words. If a man is cold and you give him a jacket, that speaks more than going and taking a survey and saying, how long have you been cold? What size do you wear? Bring the man something to warm him.
That's right.
That's the language. You see a man hungry out of doors, bring them something to help them. You don't need to ask him, are you hungry? If a man is out in the cold under a viaduct, you know he's hungry. Your essence, your spirit knows it. Your nature compels you to act. That is the language of the original man in truth. And the more we act on that, we'll be able to break down those other barriers of the artificial languages, which are from our enemy, English and Spanish. So both of them are insufficient to really convey, but we have to have a base to communicate on. So learn how to say hermano, hermana, ¿cómo estás? You know, just these basics to let them know, I care, I see you. That's enough. Trust me, it's enough to get you in the door, because all they've known all of their lives, just like the black man and woman of America. It's no different to be a black man and woman in Puerto Rico or Cuba or Mexico or Venezuela or Panama. They face the same difficulties. So if you know what it's like to be a black man in America, guess what? You know what it's like to be a black man in Panama.
Come on, brother.
In Belize. So then all they've known is hard-heartedness, rejection. They've never just had somebody offer them good for the sake of good. There's always some other hidden intention. We don't have that. They would ask us, why are you here? Because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan taught us to love ourselves and love all of our people, and you are our people. That's why we're here. You can't argue with that. What do you need from us? I don't need anything from you except for you to be better, for you to know who you are, so you can be yourself and be what and who Allah God created you to be. The rest is between you and your Lord.
All praises due to Allah.
Thank you for sharing that, dear brother.
Yes.
We'll keep the questions coming, Brother James. We got some rolling in, so we'll post this one on the screen.
Yes, sir.
It says, Assalamu alaikum. This is Brother Rodolfo. Why did the Honorable Elijah Muhammad use Mexico as one of his homes? What is the significance of our future work in Mexico? Our dear brother asked about.
Well, you know, I would have to ask him to know exactly what his purpose was for that. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad would be the one to fill us in for sure.
Right.
From what I can see of it and what we learned from his wife, his beloved wife, our beloved mother, Tainetta Muhammad, from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and from his children, Student Minister Ishmael Muhammad, Student Minister Rasul Muhammad, our Minister of Information, Brother Ahmed Muhammad.
Yeah.
Mexico was a very important place. It's even signaled in his table talks initiative that Imam Sultan Rahman Muhammad has online, that there would be an expansion of the work of the resurrection of the dead outside of America, because the so-called Negro, as it says in our Constitution, the Muslim program, what the Muslims want and what the Muslims believe, it says that we believe in the resurrection, right? But we believe that it begins first amongst the so-called Negroes in America because they are most in need. Mm-hmm. However, it also says we believe in the resurrection of the righteous. That is another aspect of this resurrection process that has to take place. So how is it going to take place? It takes place by us expanding the work. So he's established his home in Mexico, as a satellite. And he talks about it having another one and other satellites going down into Central and South America as basis from which we operate to teach our people. Yes. And Mother Taineta asked him, what would you teach them? Same teaching. Yes. Well, then that means it's got to be the same people, because if you're a doctor giving people the same medication and the medicine is only for one specific type of person and you give it to somebody else, you could be charged with malpractice because potentially you're giving it to somebody who is not fit to take the same medication. So he, being a master healer, when he says this healing is good for the black man anywhere in the world, and then is asked, well, what teaching would you give to these people in Mexico? The same teaching. Then obviously he's letting us know this teaching is much more than you might think it is on the surface. That's and right. These people that you think are different, they are much closer to you than you might think, because the same medicine that is good for you is necessary for them, because they don't know who they are either. Right. So they need to be healed. They need to be lifted. They need to be taught so that they can be themselves. And the process begins through Mexico, I believe, because in Mexico, you find a people and a black population that has been hidden for hundreds of years now, because you have there the erasure of the black presence until recently, where just in the last census in Mexico, they have now Afro descendants as a possible lineage that you could choose for yourself. But prior to that, blackness had all but been written out of the history of Mexico. They pay homage to it in a superficial sense, where they talk about the three roots of the people of Mexico: the Spaniard, the indigenous, and then the black is always the forgotten third one, because they don't want that connection truly established, because the indigenous and African connection is really one connection. And in truth, even that Spanish connection, if you look deep enough into it, yes, sir, you run into the Moors who conquered Spain under the name of Andalusia for over 7 centuries. So blackness is at the root of the people of Mexico. But as long as we're taught that the only black people are those called so-called Negroes in America, and that they're the only people like that and have no connection to the other darker people of the earth, then we all are at odds with one another, because we don't know the truth of self or the truth of other than self. So we don't know what our brothers and sisters look like, because we don't know what we're looking at. We don't know the mixtures. We don't know the origin. We don't know the tricks and schemes and lies that the enemy has said to us. So we're constantly in this web of despair and delusion, looking at reality, trying to make sense of it, saying, oh, man, I don't look like them. They don't look like me. Of course they don't. The mixtures are different.
Come on, brother.
The culture was different. In America, they excluded the black man exclusively based on his color. In Central and South America, they created a more complex caste system, always excluding you based on your blackness, but there were degrees of blackness that they gave there. Here it was universal. Black is out. There, you could be 1/8 black, and you might be all right in certain settings. You could be 1/4 black, And if you marry a Spaniard, your next generation moves up to quarter black, like a lottery or draft system.
Wow.
Where you're trying to move up in the caste system by lightening the complexion of your offspring. So the terminology that came and arose in Latin America was mejorar la raza, to better the race. And what was meant was you better the people by making them more white in appearance. So they'll be more acceptable to the dominant culture, which was white supremacy, just more layered in Latin America, more diluted by the idea that they weren't slaves, they were married. Because after slavery was abolished, many of the owners married their children's mothers because it was looked down upon by the Catholic Church to have these illegitimate children. So they said, well, let them marry. So here you wore the name of your slave master. There we wore the name of not necessarily our slave master because slavery was abolished, but the rapist, who you didn't really choose to marry. You had to marry. So now we have these cultures that developed different, but one core common thing. Everybody looked up to whiteness because the idea in both cultures was the supremacy of white-skinned people based on their whiteness. And we thank Allah because the only thing that can destroy that is not to substitute it with some sort of black theology, black liberation theology. No, real black theology is the truth. And it is only the truth that has and will set our people free. Black, brown, red, yellow, and even the poor white who've been indoctrinated and are beginning to see that something is wrong with what they've been taught.
No praise is due to Allah. You know, I remember, brother, looking on Facebook and watching clips from a documentary or really a movie about Christopher Columbus, or Cristobal Colon, as we know his name to be now. Thanks be to the secret relationship between blacks and Jews. All praise is due to Allah. But the enemy is the same. The Holocaust suffered by our Carib Indian brothers and sisters when Cristobal Colon was trying to find a way to the West Indies and landed in the Caribbean. What they did to the population, how they destroyed through genocidal activity that population is brutal, absolutely brutal. So we have that in common. But talk to us about, how do you make the distinction between Spanish, the Carib Indians, then the different kinds of levels of ethnicity? And in many cases, we look at everybody that speaks Spanish.
Right.
As Spanish, you know?
No, absolutely. You know, brother, and that is true. And what has happened is, even back before the Europeans came, there were tribal differences in each of these regions. You had different tribes in what is today called North America, different tribes in what is called Central America, different tribes in the Caribbean, different tribes in South America even. And very, what we would today call nationalistic, but it was tribalistic, I guess we would call them then, right? But they were different nations, each with their own cultures, many variants of different languages. So there was even at times confusion because the different tribes spoke different languages. One of the reasons that, for example, the Aztecs are considered such a great tribe is they were able to unify many of the different tribes under a federation that spoke a more similar language at its root. So there is something to this language, right? And the ability to communicate really being the driving force behind it. When each people, and it's understandable, they want to be recognized for their flag, for their tribe, for their nation, for their direct root, right?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. That's common. That's understandable. It's the same principle that when someone shows you a photograph, the first thing you're looking for is yourself or someone you know.
That's right.
It's logical. You want something familiar. there's a fear intrinsically of the unknown because there is a lack of knowledge of it. So we become accustomed to and find a comfort in what we do know. So of course it makes sense then that if I'm from Cuba, a little island, and that's all I've known is Cuba and its way, the foods, the way we speak, the way that unspoken communication that we have with other Cubans in our homeland. And now we are transplanted to another place, like the United States of America. Well, it's not that I'm necessarily against Puerto Ricans or Mexicans, but you could see why I would not want to be grouped with them, because there may be negative stereotypes attached to those other people, and or just a strong, firm love of my connection and pride in my motherland, right? My homeland. So I don't want to be misplaced or labeled by something I'm not. Maybe because of negative stereotypes of it, or just because, hey, no, I'm so and so. Don't call me that. You know, this is who I am. Now, if you don't have a sense of that kind of nationalism, it may seem a little bit off-putting, because especially as Americans, quote unquote, right, from the United States, and Black people from America in particular, we don't have that kind of connection to be an American, right? But you'll notice many of our African brothers, if they're Nigerian, they want to make sure you know I'm Nigerian.
That's right.
I'm not an African, I'm a Nigerian, not a generic name, right? This is natural in that sense. It's foreign to us in America because we have not had that connection to a real homeland. But the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches us nationalism inordinately. And if we hold on to it too long and exclusively, it becomes a negative for us. Because now we become exclusive, where I don't care about anyone who's not from my tribe, my nation. I only want, if you're not Cuban, whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, then that means we're stuck in a particular growth or lack of growth that we need assistance with. That's why we are so thankful for these teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, because it doesn't make you to negate or put down your national flag. It makes you understand that that flag is only as vital, only as valuable as it is towards the greater cause of all of the peoples from whatever nation they come from. So if I'm only concerned about myself, and I put myself on a little island or a little country, Mexico, and I'm just concerned with Mexicans, what happens when something terrible affects all of the Mexican people? And I have not extended my charity, I have not extended my connection, I have not extended my thinking and heart to understand that I'm part of a world community that Allah himself has permitted. And it's really exemplified perfectly in these words from the Holy Quran. Allah made us into tribes and families, not that we might hate one another, but so that we might know one another. Mm-hmm. If we know one another, knowledge, that means I understand something about your history, something about your struggle, something about your suffering, and I'll even see how it connects to the struggle and suffering of my people, and understand that all people who have a nation today have gone through something to make it a reality. And in that, it allows me to feel a sense of kinship with them. And it allows me to have respect for them, because I know about one of or two of their great revolutionaries, and I see the relationship from their revolutionary to the one from my homeland that I love. So I can see a bond between Bookman. I can see a bond between Pedro Albizu Campos. I can see one between Zapata and Pancho Villa. And I can see a connection with them going all the way across the ocean to the great warriors and chiefs from Africa. And even the connection to those great different tribes in the islands, with the samurai, with the different groups that had champions who stood up for the people, who lived and died on principles. But we only can do that when we have a greater perception and understanding, a greater knowledge of knowing that all of the people live under a same universal law in principle, that out of the natural need of a people, nature will provide that human being which answers the cry for what the people need in terms of justice, in terms of advancement. And that same nature that produces a Nat Turner produces a Pancho Villa, produces Emiliano Zapata, produces Che, produces Castro, produces Hugo Chavez, produces a Dr. King, produces a Reyes Lopez Tijerina. See, all of these names that we don't know because we're disconnected from one another. And if we just studied a little bit about each other, we could see, oh man, do you know about your man? You know, you teach a Puerto Rican about Pedro Albizu Campos, a man who was educated here in the United States, but went back and fought for the independence of the Puerto Rican people. And they called him El Maestro, the master, the teacher. And whenever you would see him, guess what? He was wearing a suit and bow tie. Everywhere he went. See, when we used to go into the Humboldt Park area with our brother who's in Milwaukee, student Captain David Muhammad, who's Puerto Rican, and we would go to some of the Puerto Rican events here in Chicago at DePaul University, hosting some of the great champions of the Puerto Rican struggle. And they would see us. Some of the old women would say, oh, Ida tienen la corbata como Don Pedro. They have on the tie like Mr. Campos, Albizu Campos used to wear it. They didn't know that we weren't trying to copy him. We were copying our teacher.
That's right.
Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Yes, sir.
Some of their great champions would stop. And we learned just by being ourselves how much love many of them had for the Nation of Islam, because they found brotherhoods with them in prison when they were locked up. They were inspired, many of them, as children from Muhammad Speaks newspaper, some random brother that nobody remembers their name who would show up in a Puerto Rican and Mexican neighborhood with a Muhammad Speaks newspaper on a Saturday and teach the brother about the Muslim program. And who would know that later that person would become somebody like Reyes Lopez Tijerina, like Jose Lopez here in Chicago, who was nurtured from and inspired to do their work for their people from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Only Allah could do that, but it starts by us having a respect for and some knowledge of who we're dealing with. If we can elevate them in knowledge, and I'll say it like this as I close out this point. The same way that the black man and woman in America has been made deaf, dumb, and blind, that goes beyond the borders now. Our people don't know about their own great leaders, their own great champions, because the enemy has dumbed the whole world down. So the more you know about yourself and just learn a little bit about the history of other people, not only will you be able to teach them what you know, but you'll inspire them to look into their own history. That's what the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan did for me.
Oh,
He said, go and put it in a way so your people understand it. That means I had to go study.
That's right.
You know?
All praise is due to Allah. That's very
so wonderful. Absolutely. And Student Minister Abel, I love how you was connecting the dots, you know, and just talking about that gap.
Absolutely.
That even exists between the brown people, because you know, I could share a story. I have a Puerto Rican friend. At one time we was in a conversation and one of our black friends called him Mexican and he got offended.
Yep.
And he said, and this was this how he explained it. Now, and this I wanted you to expound even more on this if you could. He said, calling a Puerto Rican Mexican, he said, it's like calling a black a Haitian. And he referenced it like it's like he putting it at a bottom state. You know, he put it, and I have seen in it verse the same way with Haitians, where they're saying, I'm not black, I'm Haitian. You know, they're exclude themselves from us. I have met people from Dominican Republic that say they won't date a black person. You know, they look at it as separate.
That's right.
I have met Cubans that's, you know, of darker complexion compared to lighter, that just don't get along. They don't see eye to eye, you know, so it's a color barrier. Also, though they it seem like they coming from the same background, speaking the same language, some of the same culture. I done met some that's, pro Castro, to some that hate him, like was speak so ill, like I had to get away, man. They come to the house and it's like they right there in front of me, like two opposing forces right there, that's from the same land. So, and I always wonder, like, why those indifferences, and I never thought of it in the sense of how, sometimes even, of course, as blacks, that we would see ourselves different too. That, I run into blacks, I don't mess with them Haitians. They crazy.
Right.
They something else. Them people crazy, like
right.
I said, we're not one of the same. But you kind of spoke on that gap, and it's just something that, I can imagine that Willie Lynch syndrome, of that we just thinking lesser of each other because of how we see each other. But is it because of culture a lot? Is it because of that racial divide when it comes to the color barrier, like in some countries, which I hear about?
Yeah.
But what brings this that we can look so much alike or be from the same place? The dialect might change up a little bit, just how it is with Spanish speaking people.
Right.
Sometimes I hear certain Spanish, like I speak Spanish, but I don't know what they say.
What
like I don't know that, but it's still some kind of division that's there. How can we help to unite that we can look beyond and rise above those the culture difference into thinking of God that help to bring us together and reverse that Willie Lynch syndrome and whatnot.
I think you hit it right on the head with the question, dear brother, Brother Chad. It really is the knowledge of God. Because as long as we are stuck in our nationalistic mind, the current nations that we originate from all are rooted in European presence. There is, even if you have an older, like Mexico, it's not necessarily a Spanish name. It's a name derived from the native people who were here, but it's just a name. Who runs that country? It is the thinking of Europeans who came and established their domain in this hemisphere. I don't care who's currently presiding over governing that land.
Come on, brother.
The mind is the mind that makes us think we're all different. Because if my origin is only as old as that flag and that name and that constitution and that revolution, then it's still limited and it still does not allow me to find my identity separate and free from the influence of the European.
Come on, brother.
And if I'm not free from that, I'll never be free. Because our origination in the world does not begin with their coming to the Western Hemisphere. That is the problem that undermines every movement in the Western Hemisphere. At the end of the day, we're still trying to define ourselves within the limitations of their understanding and their identification of us, and we're afraid to exclude them from our origin.
Come on, Brother Abel.
Because they put fear into us. We are afraid to be called a hater. It's not a hater to love the truth.
That's right.
Truth is what will free us from them. What is the truth? They weren't even on the planet when we began.
That's right.
We've been in this part of the world called the Western Hemisphere for more than 2, almost 3 times longer than they've been even in existence on the planet.
Wow.
We cannot keep being ashamed to speak truth to falsehood and hurl truth at falsehood, but our nature has been corrupted and dominated to make us docile to their whims. So we're afraid to say, oh, they've been bad to us. Well, some of them have been bad to us. All right, whatever. Those are semantics. You know what I mean. And you and I are not haters of light-skinned or white-skinned people. There's no record of that anywhere amongst the indigenous people, aboriginal people in this hemisphere or the old hemisphere.
Teach, bro.
Only records are from us fighting back after they treated us wickedly and unjustly. Never us being the aggressors. Even in our savage state, we were not the aggressors of them, or else there would be none of them left on the planet.
Come on.
So what we have to get into now is to be lovers of the truth. What's wrong with saying Our origin has nothing to do with this third root European. Nothing. The origin of this nation does. The origin of this modern world system in this hemisphere does. But that's not my origin in the world. That's the current expression. That's a leaf on a branch of a tree that has no beginning. That branch is on its way to falling off right now. So we don't even want to waste time on it. All we want to know now is, who am I? And you can't find that by getting on a ship and going to Columbus, going to Spain, going to Queen Isabella. You don't find our beginning there. You can't even really find it here in the Western Hemisphere in the last 16,000 years. That's recent 16,000 years ago. You have to go back to when there was a state of what is defined as triple darkness. You have to go all the way back to when there was nothing but the originator himself. That's my root as a so-called indigenous person, so-called aboriginal person. That's our root. My root is not any European, not any tribe. My root is God himself. And until we're unashamed to say that and declare it to the world, we're always going to be compromised, and we're always going to be found short, because we're always going to be found including them back into a conversation which they are really not qualified or fit to be involved in. When it comes to our identity identity is with God himself, point blank, period. Yes, I'm a Mexican in terms of the modern expression. But in terms of my definition, the defining essence of who I am, a nation a couple of 100 years old can't define that. Call me, like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said, I am God.
That's right.
That's our identity. Whether you're in Puerto Rico, whether you're in the Dominican Republic, and the problem is this, and I'll close. Because we don't see ourselves like that, we'll never identify our brother and sister like that. Because if it's true for me and I recognize it as true for me, now my chest has to be expanded so that I can properly see, oh, well, you know what? That black man in America, that's God too.
That's
that
right.
one in Puerto Rico, he's God too. He comes from that same essence. But as long as we get some fulfillment and think that we got some sort of special favor coming because I'm tied to this strain from Europe, that presence, that family title from Peru or from Portugal, from Germany, all of these French, all of this stuff that we get involved with. As long as we keep thinking that that's where our value comes from, we're never going to reach our real value, which is predating all of that. We're the original people.
That's
it. Yes. Everything else is a branch. All right, you can celebrate the branch if you want to. I want the root, all of it.
Come on. Absolutely. Praise
all
be to
praise is due to Allah.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we are overjoyed to announce the obvious, that our dear sister, Stala Muhammad, has joined us. And we are exceedingly happy, sis, to see you. All praise is due to Allah. I'm sure you did an excellent job on the radio program with our dear brother, Vaughn.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother James. Brother Chad, Brother Abel.
Walaikum salam.
Please, and to the Closing the Gap viewing and listening audience, so pardon my tardiness this evening. Like Brother James stated, I had the opportunity to be on our dear brother DJ Rockwell's program that lasted an hour, but I said now it's time to cross over to the other episode. Let me go ahead and go back on with my brothers on Closing the Gap. So thank you.
All praise is due to Allah. Now, you did let him know that you are under contract, just in case he had any ulterior motives.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Praise be to Allah. Speaking of DJ Rockwell, Brother Abel, I was watching one time an interview that you did, with him, which was a great interview, just speaking about some things. Just wonderful. That was wonderful. And then when I was watching that, I also ran across something where you had an experience at the Million Man March. We just got through commemorating the 28th anniversary of it. But your experience, if you don't mind sharing, because I remember you were sharing your experience and you was talking about the highlights that you came with some of the Chicano family.
Yes.
But you were saying there was one thing, one thing that you had disliked about being there, if you could remember, and that you was talking about that you would hope you could have seen more of. If that'd kind of give you a hint.
Definitely. You know, definitely.
But if you can take us from that point to when Justice else in 2015, when just in being in charge of helping coordinate the Latino participation in indigenous people. So from that experience to the 2015 experience, if you could share that, please.
Yes, sir, dear brother. You know, I was not a registered Muslim at the time of the Million Man March. And as a matter of fact, I had spent about 2 months in Cuba from about July to the end of August, early September. At some point, I came back, and I really only came back from Cuba because I wanted to attend the Million Man March. I was so close to just staying there because I had not experienced that level of an enlightened citizenry any place I'd ever been in my life. You know, there was definitely difficulties there. Don't get me wrong. There were rolling blackouts there. There was no hot water, but you're in the Caribbean. You don't really need a lot of hot water. These are just the luxuries we have here in this part of the world. But you realize living amongst people with less, when you see them so happy, how spoiled we are to a degree, and how ungrateful we are for much of what we take for granted. And living amongst them for several weeks to months, I fell in love with the Cuban people, and I didn't want to leave, but I knew the Million Man March was coming up. And that's the only reason my heart was troubled. I said, I got to go back. I got to go back. I do not, something again compelled me. I do not want to miss this. And I went with a beautiful Mexican brother who passed just a few years ago, even though we were about the same age. It might be a year or two difference with us, but he unfortunately passed away a few years ago now. Beautiful brother named Oscar Montenegro. May Allah be pleased with him, who we were real tight back in 95. We used to every day be together. He was just a beautiful musician, artist, electrician, just this one of these super, one of those people you meet in life that everybody likes them. Everybody wants to be their friend, and there's nothing flashy about them. There's nothing, but there's also nothing they wouldn't give to you. And they always seem to have something to give to people, no matter what's going on in their life. You always find them helping somebody someplace. That's what this brother was. And me and him he went to my first Savior's Day in February of 95 with me. And he went to the Million Man March with me later that year. And when I say we were together every day, I mean, for that year between 94 and 95 to 96, there were probably maybe 2 weeks total combined days that I may not have seen him, talk to him, spent time with him. We were that close. And me and the brother went with a group of, everybody else on the bus was black brothers from a halfway house here in Chicago. And we met a few brothers here and there. We saw Costa Rican flag, Panamanian flag, but we didn't really see any other Mexican native brothers at the Million Man March. I know they were there because there was another Mexican brother from Chicago. I didn't see him at the march, but I found out later he used to go to my high school. He's a few years older than me. He went to the Million Man March too. And he was a beautiful brother. And so that's another one right here from Chicago that I knew about. I knew some of the native brothers that went from LA with the Harmony Keepers that day, but we weren't visible that day, really, right? Which is right, because that was a day for the black man, particularly because of what was going on in the world. But I didn't realize that there was much support from different parts of the country, native and Mexican and Latino brothers who did support it, but they weren't necessarily visible. And I don't believe there was even one speaker necessarily that was from that community, which again, not in any negative way, that was a very focused, specific day. Mother Taineta Muhammad did speak about it, and even the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan did mention the Latino, the Mexican people in his address that day at the Million Man March. my takeaway from it was that I just wish I would have seen visibly more of us there. And that was my driving force after that, right? I didn't know that we'd ever go back there. I didn't know that we'd ever have a chance to go back, but I was blessed to be a part of the efforts towards the Million Family March. And there was more of us there at the Million Family March. I saw Puerto Ricans. I saw Puerto Rican flags. I was part of the effort for the Millions More movement. And there was definitely a bigger presence there. Even being addressed from the podium, Emma Lozano, representative from Congressman Gutierrez's office at that time, spoke from on the mall that day at the Millions More movement. And then 20 years later, then at 2015, to be blessed myself to have a whole contingent. And if you look now at many of the photos, there were a lot of Black people there, but there were Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, Cubans, natives. We had the teepees on that lawn that day.
Yes.
And it just showed the growth of the message, because the world now was ready, because the tone had been set. And to see the progression and the growth of that, and know that it is every day, every week, every month, every year, more and more are listening, more and more are tuning in, more and more are finding what they need and know that they must have in this that we have been given by Allah God. Just to see that natural progression was such a blessing, and really something that I'm always going to be grateful for, to have a hand in helping to organize that, along with Sister Yonajda, our beautiful sister from the Aboriginal and indigenous communities and the Black community. But with those who came from the different backgrounds, it just means so much to be a part of that growth, to be blessed by Allah, to not only desire it, but then see it and know that slowly but surely, and not slowly anymore, it's happening quicker and quicker, our people are beginning to see an aspect, I'll say it like that, of the fact that what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has given to us through the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, it's not what the enemy has painted it to be. It's not some side teaching for only this one group in a specific place, but it is an absolutely divinely revealed word that begins with a specific group, as all messages from divine have. But ultimately, as it evolves and grows, will affect all of humanity who wishes and longs for something better. So to be a part of that actual history is really beyond words. I had not thought about it in that context till you asked me that right now, Brother Chad. But I really am thankful, because how often do we say, oh, I wish, and then we go and just wish, and then to have a wish and be blessed to work to make that wish a reality. And I'll share this with you. After 2015, about a week after the Justice or Else March, I received a call from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And I was on my way to an event with my daughter, my oldest daughter at the time. And we were driving. I had to pull over. Once I saw who it was, I was almost at the event. I pulled over, and he said my teacher wanted to thank me. He said because he loved what he saw, he loved what he heard.
Wow.
And he was so thankful. He said that our family is beginning to come and listen and see what is this, that this is a message for them. So that was, of course, the epitome of it all. It's one thing to know what you want, but to know that that's also the heart of the servant of Allah God, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and to have any part in helping make him relieved, happy, pleased, however you want to phrase it, joyous,
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
in any positive way affect him, that means more to me than anything else, next to only seeing the joy on our own people's faces when they were in brotherhood with one another, in sisterhood with one another, beginning to realize, all right, we can do this. In spite of all the obstacles we've set up in our thinking because of the enemy's lies, man, when we come together, this feels pretty good. And like we talked about, we can sit around a table and argue with each other for weeks, but it's somehow when we just get around the table, things begin to work for the better of us, and we begin to dialogue, and we begin to eat, and we begin to recognize our music, and we begin to talk about our struggle. And that's where the real bonds are formed. And I think on that day, Allah was blessed because we were able to bring all of the family together. And everybody heard one another and said, you know what? We're all kind of in the same boat here. What sense does it make for you to fight over there, me to fight over there? We're fighting the same man, but we're weakening ourselves by trying to take on this monster by ourselves, when we can unify forces, come together and address and demand what we should be receiving in terms of justice with a unified, expanded, and strengthened voice, rather than crawling into a corner and trying to backdoor your cry for justice in a way so that you feel you might get what somebody else isn't going to get. Allah is in control of it all today. We just want to make sure we are making those connections and pushing our people towards the ultimate goal, which is unity, because it's our unity which will get us what else we need.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, dear brother, for that. Sharing that absolutely great testimony. Alhamdulillah.
Let's get our sister involved here.
Brother Abel, you've done some tremendous work in the community. I believe you shared with us the last time you were on the show, the church that you have been going to speak at, and the overwhelming number of young people who you've had the opportunity to minister unto. So when we're talking about this topic, rising above and beyond culture into the thinking of God, what is it that you've seen in the young people that you've had an opportunity to work with, that do they seem to be more receptive than, quote unquote, the old guard when it comes to this really rising above culture and breaking down these barriers of division? And if so, why do you think that is?
Absolutely, dear sister. They really are put off by the old guard. And most of them, their experience is universal in that they view the elders as saying one thing, but their actions don't measure up to their words. So they talk of love, but then they dog one another in private. They talk about loving everyone, yet they mistreat the servant in private. And they have a very little tolerance for that, our young people, because they see it as hypocritical. And they are much more open to the idea of somebody from a different culture, different background than the older ones are. Because the older ones are, well, that's not my denomination. Well, how are you gonna try to, like the Million Man March, we can use it as an example. People will come, are you gonna try to make people convert to Islam? Got questions for you before they'll help. Young people aren't really like that. What can I do? Well, what do? I take pictures. Bring your camera. Come take pictures of the event. They don't ask who's going to be there. What do they believe? What's their race? They don't even ask, am I getting paid? They bring their camera. What can I do? This is what I do. This is what I like to do. What can I do? Well, we already have a cameraman. Do you mind helping us at the door today? Sure. See, that's the spirit that our young people have. Some of them are trained professionals with, doing lighting and cameras, but you'll see them at a coat check at an event. And it reminds me very much of the spirit of the people of Cuba. When I was blessed to be there, over 80%, I believe, of the population is doctors, some ridiculous figure like that in Cuba. It's absurd how many doctors they have in Cuba.
Wow.
And when I went there, we got to, it was not open to the public, but we got to go inside the Museum of the Revolution at that time. And beautiful Black woman who was a security guard in there. And a group of us were conversing with her. And we started asking her, what area she was from, just meeting the person. Come to find out she's a doctor. Security guard in a museum, doctor.
Wow.
So of course the logical question is, well, if you're a doctor, what are you doing here as a security guard? She said, well, we don't need any doctors. We have too many doctors, but we don't have anyone to do security at the museum. So I was asked, this is how she phrased it. If for the revolution, I would accept this role, though I'm qualified to be much more. Until a need is open, would I accept this position for the revolution? She said, and of course I would. But I thought it was so beautiful. That's the spirit of our young people today. I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a rapper, I'm a singer, I'm a painter. All right, but today we got enough painters. What do you need me to do? You need somebody to buff the floor? I don't know how to do that. If somebody will show me, I'll do it. And so we have skilled people paired with others who are just willing workers. And that little group of young people has transformed the church physically, not because they're expert craftsmen, but because their hearts have been expanded to the point where it's not egotism. They're not looking for, well, you don't believe like I believe. You're not from where I'm from. There's literally Jews there, Jewish girls who are singers and artists, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Black, Asian, Indian, male, female, everything. Some who are religious, some who are non-religious, some who are spiritual, some who are non-spiritual. Yet they find a way to come together. Why? Because the objective is not dogma. The objective is we all want to help, and that's enough. Wow. The only criteria is, are you willing to help? Wow. And can you help in the way that's being asked? But that's very revolutionary in this kind of framework, right? That we're not used to in the white man society. In this society, it's like, well, what am I going to get out of it?
That's right.
You're going to get the benefit of knowing you helped your people. Isn't that enough? Doing the good for the sake of good? Well, how much are we going to charge? We're going to make it free. Well, now I know there's no money involved. All right, well, do I get to perform? Not this time. We already got the people who are going to be performing. So now there's no clout involved. Now, what's your motive? Are you here to help the people, or are you here because you have something you want to get out of it? Mm-hmm. And that is what I've learned from these young people. They have, don't get me wrong, you see it every day. They have their vices, they have their issues, but those are circumstantial. At their essence, I am beginning to understand by working with them and looking at them why the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said this is the greatest generation we've ever produced, and that this is a generation born for the Messiah. Because there's a combination of fearlessness and giving that is unlike anything I've seen. I believe it's because they have no attachment to any religious philosophy or system. They have no clout or investment in educational paradigms from this world. And they really don't even care about the social and what you would call media structure of this world. They use it for their benefit, social media and such, but they're not invested in it. They're not trying to end up on NBC or CBS. Nope. They'll use it for their benefit because they already have something greater in mind. And I think it's not by accident. And I'll share this with you all at the end of the summer, or during the summer, excuse me, not the end of the summer. They had, I think it was over 100 young people that came in for the summer in their program at that church. And they were reading the final call together. Black, brown, red, yellow, and white. And they were creating artwork together. And almost all of them, I'll see if I can find a picture and share it with you all. It was a picture from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan from the Criterion. And it was a white girl, a black girl, a Mexican girl. They painted a painting, the three of them together, with this picture of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as the center of the photo.
Wow.
And they clipped some of his words from the Final Call article and put it as a part of the painting. And I have a video of them explaining what the photo and the painting means to them, that he embodied love. All of the people come see this. This is why the enemy does not want the people to hear the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan for themselves, because he has a way of getting past whatever you may have perceived of him. Once you hear him for yourself, it touches something in you, because he's made by God to bring something out of you that only God can bring out of you.
Teach, brother. Yes, sir.
And that's what I'm learning from these people, these young people. that they have absolutely at their essence God, unfiltered, untainted with. And what the enemy is doing is just trying to keep them confused long enough and away from the man of God who will stand them up strong, because they're going to fight one way or the other, but they'll succumb quicker if they're disconnected from the man who is the source of strength. And that's why they want to come up with these laws to make it really illegal for him to be heard. Because when they hear him for him themselves, he wins them all. I've seen it. I was in awe of it. I was in tears watching the video, because it made me realize even that, you know, there's a saying, brothers and sisters, that the prophet, peace be upon him, he had prayed that those in the latter days would understand him better than those who were contemporaries of his at that time. And I'm wondering if sometimes those of us who may have been walking 2 decades, 3 decades, 5 decades, 6 decades with the man of God, if we get caught up in a time warp and think that our understanding of a generation ago is the understanding of the man today. And Allah gives us glimpses through the young people. He was not made for 6 decades ago. He has been formed and made for today.
That's right.
And to get them safely across what, through what, and to what he's made for them. And I'm have to bear witness to seeing them respond to him, that he does what only the servant of God can do. He reaches God's people in a way that all we can do is marvel. All we can do is, I understand why those who were in the presence of the Lamb just threw their crowns down.
That's right, brother.
All you can do is say all praise is due to Allah. That's and right. Thank Allah that we recognize him. But the recognition should not be something that is an impediment. The recognition should be something that allows us to say, let me help him. How can I help him? Let me get out of the way and get people to him.
That's right.
And the more we do that with these young people, the better off they'll be, because he is made for them and they are absolutely made for him.
All praise is due to
Allah.
Praise
be to Allah.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
We have another question that came in a little early, wanted to share also from our dear sister Amina Muhammad. And she states, our family strive to watch weekly Juma online. We seem to come away with a renewed spirit or energy every Friday. Can you speak on your first time delivering a khutbah and the value of Juma?
Ooh, you know, honestly, I don't even remember the first time I did it. You know what? I honestly couldn't tell you if it was 5 years ago. I honestly have no clue. I'd have to go back and ask Imam Sultan. I really have no clue how long I've been doing that. I know I was nervous because I'm nervous every time I do it. Yeah. But I'm sure I was extra nervous the first time, but I really don't even have a time frame for it. That's peculiar. I never even thought I might have to go look back in the archives. I really don't have a clue. Is it only been 2 years? I really don't. I have to go check the tape on that one. But I will say this. I remember being taught by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan how to conduct a khutbah. Mm-hmm. And this was back in 2002. Yes, I believe, because my oldest daughter was just born. So it was about 21 years ago now in the summer. He was teaching us, and I still have my notes from that. And that's still what the basis of it is. By the grace of Allah, we've had the great help of Imam Sultan Rahman, who anytime I deliver a khutbah, you're hearing a lot of Imam Sultan in that khutbah, because I'm sending him messages, and between him and his sons, they're giving me Arabic breakdowns of words. And I have to mention our beautiful brother down in Houston, Brother Abdul Ansar down there in Houston, who also, I'll reach out to him from time to time too and say, brother Ansar, what's this word mean in Arabic? Because I'm just learning Arabic, but I don't have all of the language yet. And more and more I'm becoming familiar with, but it's undoubtedly the help of our Imam, Brother Ansar down in Houston, and of course the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, just trying to always feed the community. It's so different than a Sunday or a Wednesday night, the Juma, because you're not preaching to, you're preaching to the choir for Juma, right? These are the converts. So
Right.
And it's more about challenging, uplifting, and helping them. You know, it's very pastoral. That may be the better word for it, right? Because it's all believers there. So now you're just trying to feed them and increase them in faith. And I believe that is the great value of Juma. That meeting specifically is just for the believer. It's ordained by Allah, and there's many blessings in it for us when we participate in it. But that's the believer's recharge. That's the believer's refuel. That's the believer knowing that, man, look, I had a rough week, but man, I made it to Juma. I'm ready to go another week now.
That's right.
That's right. What it is. I saw a woman yesterday. You know these new electric cars? You got to go to the electric car station. I ran to the store last night, and there's a place by me where they have about a dozen different ports where you can park, right? Inside of a bigger parking lot.
Yes.
I guess her car couldn't make it. She was on the opposite side of it, and I think unplugged it from somebody else's car and came and pulled it as far as it could go on the opposite side of the street or the little barrier and plugged her car in just to get a little fix. That to me is like what Juma is like. Look, man, I've got to get mine here because we have Sunday, we have Wednesday, we have Friday. Those are all good. Those are necessary for us as believers. But for our spiritual growth, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad outlines for us in Message to the Black Man in America on the section on prayer, the value of the communal or the Juma prayer on Friday, there is no substitute for it because it makes it practical. The principles that we're teaching, that we're all equal, the king, the peasant, everyone comes together. Nobody gets a special position because of rank or whatever. Everyone is the same rank, believer. And that's enough. And it's a great reminder and inspiration for each of us. And hopefully those of us who are blessed to deliver that word on Friday, that's our objective, to give the believer knowledge, to challenge the believer to do better, be better, and to know that our way of Islam, our way of devotion that Master Father Muhammad has given to us through the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we don't have to adulterate it for anyone.
Teach, brother.
It is sufficient. We're Muslims. That's our dress, our way, though. Yeah, we can say some of it in Arabic because that's our language. We're not borrowing it from anybody. That's our language too. Right. So we'll say some of it in Arabic, but even if we don't, if we say the prayer in English, you speak English, follow along. I've gone to many places, excuse me, where they only offer the khutbahs in a language that the average person can't understand unless you're from the Arab-speaking world, which I guess is fine, but the majority are English speakers here.
Come on.
So why would we now alter that for anyone else? So we see ourselves as definitely a part of the world community of Muslims, but we also know that we've been distinguished by Allah God.
That's right.
Our job is not to fit in with them.
No.
We have been given a vanguard position.
That's right.
Seriously. So what you hear on Fridays is bearing witness to the correctness of what we've been taught. It does not separate us from our brothers and sisters, but we are distinguished in the way we've been taught to represent this word. And that's why we're successful, because we're not trying to copy their way. We're trying to bring to light that which many are missing in the traditional ways, because the traditions have in many cases lost their spirit, lost their focus. And we've been given a new light that we plan to shine throughout the world.
Allah.
Praise
be to Allah. Thank you for answering that question. Our dear sisters that asked it, she most definitely was appreciative of your answer there, brother. Thank you.
Well, let's try to get one more question in before we go to our closing announcements. Sister Starla, do you?
Yes, sir.
Take note of
yes, sir. Brother Abel, of course, on the 16th of October, around the Nation of Islam, the FOI and the MGT and their various mosques and study groups participated in a national day of service. And from my understanding, in the great city of Chicago, part of that effort and outreach was to our brothers and sisters in the migrant community. Of course, there's a great number of our brothers and sisters who are here from Central and South America. So from my understanding as well, yourself and some of our other brothers and sisters who are Spanish speakers were able to interact and participate. Can you talk a bit about that effort and outreach, particularly to that segment of our community?
Absolutely. And we mentioned it just earlier, we touched on it a little bit. It was under the spearheading of our brother Sadiq and his family and in his extended family under the Farrakhan Cares Initiative, where they had already earlier in October fed many of our brothers and sisters, taking sweatshirts, hoodies, because the temperature dropped very quickly in the last few weeks here in Chicago. And them coming from Central and South America, they were not equipped to be out in tents and on the street with the Chicago colds coming in. So they had sweatshirts printed up that said Farrakhan Cares on it, hoodies, skull caps, t-shirts. We gave them medical service. We had, I think it was at least 16 to 19 medical professionals on site to help them with any issues they might be experiencing, as many of the young children had coughs and whatnot. Actual doctors from the University of Chicago under the auspicious and leadership of our brother, Dr. Abdullah Pratt from there. We had our brothers and sisters from my two barbers, I'm proud to say, Brother Earl and Brother Arthur Muhammad, the personal barber of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He came out there and they were giving free haircuts to the brothers right there on the street.
Allahu Akbar. Yes.
They had at least 4 or 5 barbers out there giving haircuts. You had clothes given away, food from Salam restaurant prepared by the MGT and GCC in these beautiful black and gold bags that said Salam on them, which of course we had to teach them what Salam meant. We had to teach them what the greetings were. We had to teach them who we were. They wanted to find out about jobs. So we had our brother Antonio Mohammed, who's from Panama, who is a expert, in all kinds of things, from carpentry to electrical to weld. I mean, the brother does everything, and he's part of Genesis Construction and Training here in Chicago. He was there getting names and numbers and helping translate to get those brothers qualified for jobs. We had brother student minister Amin was there with us, just helping to direct all of the people that we were there to assist with. And we were at more than one site. That was the one site that I was at, but I believe we were at 3 or 4 sites, and it was 1,000 people that were fed and clothed and helped on that day. All because that's the spirit that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has given to us: service. Right. We weren't there trying to make converts. It wasn't a fishing trip, for us to just try to get people to come to we saw a need and we wanted to help them. Of course, they asked questions. Of course, we had a chance to teach them. Very important that we teach them. We can't just bring them, what does the scripture say, Brother James? Man cannot live by bread alone.
That's right.
So we had to give them the word of the Messiah that will never be expired, and which, if they take that in, they'll never be thirsty again.
That's right.
Not that they won't have physical thirst, but their souls will be nourished with what they need. Their life will have the guidance that's required. That's what we were offering to them. But you can't teach a man who's hungry.
That's right.
You can't give or you have to give assistance to a woman who's out on the street. It's difficult. They can see God, but they still have the need that's there. They still need a place to stay. They still need shelter. They still need resources. And we were able to provide all of that because we've been given that word. Wow. And they received it with great joy. They asked us if we would be back. They wanted to hear more, and we're planning to go back to them with more. But that particular day of service on October the 16th, the 28th anniversary of the Million Man March, was very important, because the enemy is trying to foster division between not only the Black community and those migrants that they're calling them that are coming, but even the Mexican community which has been asking for, work permits for years, and they're still not getting them. Yet here they see another group being bussed in and given what appears to be preferential treatment. They're being given work permits. They're being given housing. They're being given all these things, while there's Black people who've been in Chicago for generations.
Come on,
Yet
brother.
they're sleeping under bridges. Why? Where was the emergency aid for the Black man and woman under the bridge? Where was the work permit for the father and mother who have 3 and 4 citizen children and are now in college, are now professionals, but they can't get the paperwork fixed on their parents? Yet here comes somebody from someplace else with no background, no nothing, and they're being given everything. Why? As if there's not a need already present. We're not asking that the brothers and sisters from Venezuela or Colombia be treated poorly. Of course not. But what we're asking is, why was there no emergency funding for those who are already here and have been contributing?
Yes,
that's a logical and rational question.
That's right.
And how come nobody can answer it is the real question. Where did the funding come from? How could millions of dollars in months be spent and more on the way? But you have citizens sleeping under bridges? That doesn't make sense to anyone. And the enemy is trying to use the justified questioning and righteous anger of the Black and Mexican community to try to foster hatred towards their brothers and sisters from Venezuela and Colombia who are just pawns in the game, because they beginning to see that they could not drive the wedge that they wanted to between the Black and the Mexican community as much as they've tried. Something has tampered with their control. So there's little skirmishes that break out here and there, but they see that they cannot divide us anymore, because they never thought that Mexicans would be able to see the Black man and woman as a real ally, and deeper as a real brother and sister.
Yes, sir.
We're right here. The Nation of Islam is what stands in the face of all of the enemy's plots and absolutely knocks the brains out of it and destroys it. They thought that they could foster the idea that Black and Mexican can't get along, yet here we are.
Come
Black
on.
and Mexican calling each other brother and sister. They fostered the idea that Mexican and Puerto Rican can't get along, yet here we are calling ourselves brother and sister. Is it perfect? No. But it's better than what they offer us.
That's right. It's perfect.
I'm married. I'm not perfect. Ask my wife. Don't ask her. A marriage, no relationship.
Come on, brother.
No bond is perfect, but that's why we're working towards a more perfect union with one another. And the only thing that allows us to be real brothers and real sisters is that we have been given the perfect truth. So now, as we are really unraveling ourselves from out of the control and mental traps that have ensnared us from the enemy, as we get more free, we become more brotherly towards one another. It's not that we have friction because it's natural. We have friction because of the enemy's interference with our connection to one another and their interference in us knowing and accessing the truth. But now that we are reaching it and getting a part of it unadulterated directly from the voice of the servant of God, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, the cat is out of the bag. So they say, well, we got to bring somebody else in. Little do they know, Venezuelans are our brothers too. Cubans are our brothers too. Colombians are our brothers too. There's 11 of us for every one of them on the planet. The only way they can survive is if we stay in their form of thinking by rejecting the truth.
Come on, brother.
But we know the truth now. Now it's just a matter of spreading it, accepting it, and then being ourselves.
Go ahead, brother. What a wonderful way to close. All praises due to Allah. Allahu Akbar.
All praises.
Well, we're at 8:55, of course, 7:55 your time, and we need to start our closing announcement. But I don't want you to go anywhere, dear brother, because we want to give you the opportunity to make some closing remarks. Praise be to Allah. So let us begin, Sister Starla.
Yes, sir. We want to thank our viewing and listening audience for tuning in for another episode of Closing the Gap. I would like to remind you to make sure you visit www.finalcall.com so that way you can take out the latest edition of the paper. You can click on that website and take out a digital subscription as well as a print subscription. In cities around the country, you can make sure you get a physical edition of the paper. When you see the FOI with the physical edition of the paper, make sure that you not only get a copy for yourself, but pick up a copy for a family member or friend. On that very same website, finalcall.com, if you click on store, that will take you to store.finalcall.com, where you can get messages from the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, as well as other student ministers in the Nation of Islam. And last but not least, Final Call Radio. That's Final Call Radio. You can download the app on your device, or you can click on Final Call Radio on the finalcall.com website, and you can listen to excerpts of messages and musical selections from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And once again, that is on Final Call Radio. Brother Chad.
Praise be to Allah. Thank you, Sister Starla. For those that are tuning in, whether it be your first, second, or third time, if you believe what you heard to be the truth and is good for our people, you want to learn more about these life-giving teachers, we want to encourage everyone to join us at www.noi.org/join. And as you see the form that's on our screen, fill out that digital form, and someone will be getting in touch with you so you can start the orientation process. All right. We also want to invite everyone that's in the Bay Area. If you're in Tampa, if you're in St. Pete or the surrounding cities, we want to invite you to come out to Mosque number 47 tomorrow to hear from our dear brother and student in the ministry, Brother Kamal X. You can come out to Muhammad Mosque 47 at 5508 North 50th Street, Tampa, Florida, and that will be at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning. But by chance, if you're not in this area, we want to encourage everyone to go to your nearest study group or mosque in your area. If you can't make it there, please tune in to our national webcast that you can tune in there at www.noi.org tomorrow to hear this wonderful lecture entitled Destroying the False Charge of Anti-Semitism, delivered by our dear brother, Student Minister Ishmael Muhammad. Make sure that y'all tune in, make time to learn tomorrow, make time for God. We thank you for listening, for all of our listeners that have been on with us from the beginning to the end, and for sharing your questions. We ask that you continue to tune in, continue to share this broadcast with friends, go on our YouTube channel and subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and let's keep making Closing the Gap, that just continue to grow by Allah's grace. Thank you. I turn it back over to you, Student Minister James.
Yes, sir. Now, we do have a flyer from the earlier broadcast of the minister in his press conference dealing with this suit against the ADL and the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So if we can put that up there, because I think it may still be up.
Yes, sir, it is. It is.
So those of you who didn't get an opportunity to view it and listen to it earlier today, go back and try to get it and hear the words of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. We are not on the defense. We've been on the defense for a long time. Now, the best defense is a good offense. Our leader has taken much. And under his instruction, we, members of the Nation of Islam, has taken much. It's time now for us to make them prove what they say of slander against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. So go back to NOI.org and see if you can pick up his message. I believe it is up. And
yes,
recorded.
Yes, sir, it is.
Praise
Yes,
be to Allah. I want to thank all of you who tuned into Closing the Gap broadcast, as well as our affiliate broadcasts. If you can put the calendar of events up, Sister Sheila, just to let people know that we are growing as a result of the great work course of the staff and of the believers that are working with CTGB Network or Closing the Gap Broadcast Network. We have 8 broadcasts now. We will probably have 9. There's one missing there, I'm sure, when we figure out exactly when they're going to be broadcasting. We don't want to have conflicts of broadcasts. But our dear sister Anissa will be joining us from the West Coast with her broadcast, mining her mind to how does it go, brother, Sister Starla? Brother Chad, Sister Starla, I always forget that name unless it's written in front of me. Do you remember?
You got me, dear brother. Also, yes.
Well, anyway, I can tell you she was on as our special guest, and if that portends or indicates what we're in store for, you don't want to miss it. So as soon as we settle the time that she'll be broadcasting, then we'll go to 9 broadcasts. We cannot wait for the return. We anxiously await the return of our dear brother, Student Minister Abel Muhammad with Nuestra Nación de Islam. We missed you so much, dear brother. We look forward to next month you returning to these streaming broadcast lines. All praises due to Allah. Again, all of what we have accomplished, we could not do that without your help. We, first of all, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us every Saturday, and those of you who watch our affiliate broadcasts as well. But we also want to ask you to help us financially, as there is a financial expense and component to this broadcast. As you can see, you can donate to the broadcast with on Cash App at $CTG broadcast, PayPal at jkingdom1@aol.com, and Zelle, Closing the Gap broadcast at gmail.com. We thank you for your continued financial support. And if you continue to support us, I guarantee you we will have something to show you. We have great plans for the network. And we also want you to write us with your critique as well as any interest that you may have in becoming a part of Closing the Gap Broadcast Network. Sister Sheila, if you can put up our solicitation for growth and development. Yes, we are expanding. We're looking for production techs, marketing techs, graphic designers, new content creators, and those who are skillful in merchandising or have creative ideas. So bring your talent. You can write us at closingthegapbroadcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. Become a part of this growing network. You won't regret it. All praises due to Allah. Thank you. And now let's go back to our dear brother and special guest, Student Minister Abel Muhammad, for his closing remarks. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Minister.
Wa alaikum salam. And I just want to thank you again, Brother Student Minister James, Student Minister Chat, Sister Starla, and all of our brothers and sisters who have tuned in this evening or who will watch this in the future. We pray that what was offered is helpful in helping you to see yourself, hear Allah, see Allah God, and see how the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as represented to us by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, are absolutely what all of our people need. And I wanted to close with just these few words, which are found in the current edition of the Final Call newspaper by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his remarks that he shared last week as part of the Nubian Leadership Circle.
Yes, absolutely.
And I wanted to extract 1 or 2 sentences that he said there. He said last week, and it's printed in the current edition of the Final Call, that Elijah Muhammad did not represent an Arab religion. He represented the religion, which is the natural religion of man, which is the nature of God, and the nature of his creation. This is what we extend to you, brothers and sisters, regardless of what nationality, what ethnicity, what religious persuasion you may currently profess. We invite you to that way of life, which is not like a new garment to put on externally. It is actually that which removes the debris that is covering the real essence of who you and I are.
Teach.
So what we are being given is not an Arab religion. We are being introduced to ourselves. So we invite you, whether you be black, brown, red, yellow,
Right.
whether you be from the north or the south, the east or the west, to hear the life-giving teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as represented by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, for yourself, and take hold to that which you feel and know is right, and apply it into your life. Ask questions about what you have questions about, that you might get understanding so that you can better apply it into your life and live better and more productive lives, so that we can make our communities safe and decent places to live by improving ourselves first and foremost, so that we can then develop our community. May Allah bless each of you. I thank you. I'm honored by your invitation again to the Closing the Gap Broadcast Network. And if it is the will of Allah, we will be back on these airwaves soon.
We look forward to it, Brother Minister. All praises due to Allah. Thank you all, and tune in next week, same time, same station, where we will be bringing to you another representative of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the Nation of Islam, bringing this great universal uniting truth from the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Thank you again, and may Allah continue to bless you all. So until next week, Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.